My name is Robert Hayes, and I'm 67 years old. And 3 nights ago, my own children mocked me across the dinner table, calling me a retired nobody who should stay out of the way before I embarrass myself. They didn't just laugh. They dismissed me like I was already fading into the background of my own family. What they didn't know was that 10 hours earlier, I had been sitting in a private boardroom on the 42nd floor of the company I built from scratch, facing the CEO who replaced me. He didn't greet me. He didn't make small talk. He locked the door, pushed a classified internal audit toward me, and said in a low voice, "Mr. Hayes, we uncovered something, and you're the only person who can stop what's coming." When I opened that file and saw the names listed under the fraud investigation, the people orchestrating a silent takeover of my life's work, my blood ran cold. Because my children had no idea that while they mocked me at the dinner table, they were sitting on top of a financial time bomb they didn't even know existed, and I was the only one holding the safety pin. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next story. And now let's get into what really happened after the CEO called me into that room. I left the CEO's office that morning with the classified audit folder tucked under my arm, walking through the lobby like a ghost while employees who once called me sir barely looked up from their screens. I didn't blame them. To them, I was just the founder who had retired last year, the old man who stepped aside quietly so the new generation could push the company forward. Nobody knew what was actually happening behind those closed boardroom doors. Nobody knew why the CEO had looked as shaken as I'd ever seen him. And nobody knew why I walked out of that building feeling like I had just stepped back into a war I thought I'd already fought. The drive home felt longer than usual. The folder sat on the passenger seat like a loaded weapon. Every time I hit a red light, I found myself glancing at it, seeing the bold red header, Internal Audit, Level 4, and the list of names on the first page. Names of people who should never have had access to the company's financial systems. Names of people with zero authorization. Names that meant one thing. Someone was staging a takeover from the inside. And the deeper I read, the more it became clear that this wasn't corruption from strangers or outsiders. This was coordinated. This was personal. When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't even make it inside before the weight of everything hit me. I sat in the car with the engine off, staring at my empty house, the same house my kids grew up in, the same one they now treated like a museum to a man who was done. At least, that's how they acted lately. My son talked to me like I was a slow computer he didn't have time to fix. My daughter barely hid her irritation whenever I asked a simple question. They weren't always this way, but lately they treated me like my life had already ended and my body just hadn't caught up yet. That night at dinner, when they mocked me, felt like the final verdict they'd silently agreed on. They thought my time was over. They thought I had nothing left to offer. They thought I was a harmless, retired relic. But while their voices echoed in my mind, "Dad, no one cares what you think anymore. Please stop embarrassing yourself. You're not part of the company. You're just in the way." My phone buzzed with a text from the CEO. "Destroy the copy I gave you. Use the one in your safe." They might already know. That message snapped me upright. My safe? I hadn't opened it in months. I walked into my study, moved the old framed family photo aside, and twisted the dial. The heavy steel door creaked open, and right there, on top of everything else, was a flash drive I didn't recognize. A small note was taped to it in handwriting I couldn't mistake even after all these years, my wife's. "For when they stop respecting you. For when the company you built becomes the weapon used against you. You'll know what to do. She died 5 years ago." That flash drive? The date written on the back was from her final year alive. My hands actually shook. I plugged it into my computer, half expecting it to be corrupted, but it opened immediately. And what I found inside wasn't just a backup copy of the audit. It was bigger. It was older. It was a financial trail that started long before the company's current leadership. A pattern the CEO had never seen. A pattern tied directly to the very people sitting at my dinner table mocking me. My own children. Payments to their accounts. Shell companies connected to their friends. Signatures that matched theirs. Documents signed under my name when I was in the hospital getting heart surgery. They had been siphoning from the company long before I retired. They had been stealing from the legacy I spent 40 years building. And the audit the CEO showed me? That was just the tip of the iceberg. My wife had known. She had saved these files. She had left them for me. She had known our kids were headed down a dangerous path. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dark study, listening to the quiet hum of the house as the weight of it all settled onto my shoulders. My kids weren't just mocking me because they thought I was irrelevant. They were mocking me because they believed I was defenseless. They believed I had no idea what they'd already taken. They believed I had no way to stop what they were planning next. They had no idea that I was holding evidence that could put all of them in handcuffs. And the scariest part? They weren't done. Because I had barely started reading the files when I saw the line that made my chest tighten. Scheduled execution of full transfer, Friday, 6 p.m. Today was Thursday. And my children were planning to wipe me out financially in less than 24 hours. And they thought I was too old, too tired, too weak to stop them. But they were about to learn exactly who I used to be, and who I still was. The next evening, I drove to my daughter's house for our weekly family dinner, the kind of tradition I used to look forward to when things were simpler, before ambition turned my children into strangers. The entire drive over, I kept replaying the files from my wife's flash drive, every transaction, every forged signature, every quiet betrayal buried under layers of family loyalty. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I realized how long they'd been building this. This wasn't a sudden decision or a moment of frustration. It was a slow, calculated dismantling of everything I had worked for. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw both their cars already there, shining like trophies in the evening light. Expensive, very expensive. The kind of cars their salaries alone shouldn't have been able to buy. The kind of cars that suddenly made perfect sense now that I knew where the extra money came from. I walked inside without knocking, something I used to do because this was home for me too, but the way my daughter looked up from the kitchen made it clear that I wasn't welcome in that same way anymore. She didn't say, "Hi, Dad." She didn't smile. Instead, she gave me a quick glance and said, "You're late. We've already started." My son sat at the table scrolling through his phone like the world revolved around him, barely acknowledging my existence. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic filled the room, but somehow everything felt cold. I took my seat at the end of the table, the place I'd always sat, but they exchanged a quick look that made my stomach twist. They didn't say a word, but I understood it instantly. They didn't want me at the head of anything anymore. Not the table, not the company, not the family. My daughter finally spoke. "Dad, we need to talk about something," she said in a tone people reserve for stubborn patients in hospital beds. "You've been retired for a year now. It's time to let us take full control of things. Step back completely." My son didn't even look up. "Yeah, just enjoy your hobbies or whatever. The company is ours now." I took a slow breath and kept my face still. If I reacted, if I snapped, if I gave them anything, it would only justify what they were planning. Instead, I asked calmly, "And what exactly do you think you're taking control of?" My daughter gave me that pitying smile that people use when they think they're the smartest in the room. "Dad, you're tired. You're overwhelmed. It happens. We're not trying to hurt you. But it's irresponsible of you to make decisions with everything that's going on." My son chimed in. "There's paperwork we need you to sign tomorrow. Just basic stuff. Transfer of remaining accounts, executive authority, health directives." My pulse kicked hard in my neck. That was the full transfer scheduled for Friday. They weren't even hiding it anymore. They thought I was blind. They thought I was worn down. They thought I was already defeated. I realized then that they didn't just underestimate me. They didn't know me at all. Before I could respond, my daughter's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen, and her expression shifted for the first time that night. It wasn't confident. It wasn't superior. It was startled, maybe even nervous. My son noticed. "Who is it?" She hesitated, then said, "The CEO." The air changed instantly. My children froze. Their confidence wavered. They weren't expecting him to call me. They weren't expecting him to know anything. And they definitely weren't expecting him to leave a voicemail that loud, clear, and perfectly timed, because all of us heard it when it played through her car Bluetooth speaker in the garage. His voice filled the room. "Mr. Hayes, it's urgent." I reviewed the files again. The Level 4 breach wasn't an algorithm mistake. It was intentional. And the names tied to it. Your children need to be warned. They're in deeper than they realize. Call me back. My kids stared at me as if I had suddenly grown a second shadow. My daughter looked pale. My son's jaw clenched. And for the first time in months, I saw something in their faces I hadn't seen in far too long: fear. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The CEO had just told them everything without meaning to. But the truth was, he hadn't told them even half of what I knew. Because the files from my wife's flash drive were still locked safely in my study. And those files didn't just show they were involved. They showed who recruited them, who funded them, who promised them power they were never meant to have. And tomorrow, Friday at 6, they were planning to finish the job. But now I knew the entire blueprint. And they didn't even know the war had started. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet tick of the old clock on my dresser, feeling the weight of everything pressing in at once. My children thought they were pulling the strings. They thought tomorrow's documents would be signed without resistance, that I was too old or too tired to understand the trap they'd built over the past year. But now the CEO's message had cracked their confidence, and the files my wife left behind had torn their entire plan wide open. At 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to answer. The voice on the other end wasn't the CEO. It was a man who hadn't spoken to me in nearly 15 years. A man I never expected to hear from again. "Robert, it's Carter." I sat up instantly. Carter Wells, former CFO. Brilliant, unpredictable, always 3 steps ahead, until he wasn't. He had resigned under strange circumstances back when my health forced me into the hospital. He vanished after that. Fired? Forced out? Rumored blackmail? Nobody ever got the real story. And now he was calling me at 2 in the morning. "I heard they reopened the audit," he said quietly. "And I heard your children's names are on it." My blood ran cold. "How do you know that?" I asked. There was a long pause, and then he said something that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Because they're working with someone who's been trying to take this company from you for over a decade. And you need to understand something, Robert, you can't trust the CEO either." For a moment, I actually forgot to breathe. "He showed me the file," I said. "He brought me in himself." "Of course he did," Carter replied. "He wants you to believe he's on your side. But you need to ask yourself one question. How long has he known? And why bring it to you now?" I didn't answer. He didn't wait. "The Level 4 audit didn't start yesterday," he continued. "It's been running in the background for 6 months. Someone authorized it long before you were brought in. And whoever that person is, they didn't want you involved until the very last second." My throat tightened. 6 months. That meant my kids weren't the only ones plotting. There was a second layer. Someone higher. Someone smarter. Someone who might have been using them. "You're in the middle of something you don't fully see yet," Carter said. "Your children think they're the masterminds, but they're pawns. Real players don't sign documents. They move people." "Who is it?" I asked. "Who's pulling the strings?" Another long pause. "I can't say on the phone," he whispered. "But I emailed you something. A document. It's encrypted. Open it before you meet your kids tomorrow. And Robert, be careful. You're not the only one with evidence." The call ended. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, phone in hand, staring at the cracked ceiling as the weight of Carter's warning settled into place. Someone inside the company, someone with real power, had been orchestrating this for months, maybe years. And my kids, with all their arrogance and ambition, were just the easiest tools to manipulate. By sunrise, I was in my study, unlocking my computer, downloading the encrypted file Carter had sent. It was protected by a password. A single clue was attached. Think like Emily, my wife, the woman who had left me the flash drive, the woman who once told me, "The first code you ever made for the company should never be forgotten." And suddenly, I remembered. A 12-character string from my earliest days building the financial backbone of the company. I typed it in. The file opened. And what I saw made the audit look like child's play. It wasn't just names. It wasn't just transactions. It was a hierarchy, a pyramid, a full organizational structure of a shadow network operating inside the company. At the top was a single code name, Orion, and directly beneath that were 3 names. My son, my daughter, and the CEO. I leaned back in my chair as everything snapped into focus. My children weren't taking over the company on their own. They were being guided. Federal manipulated. They'd been promised power by someone who outranked all of them. And the CEO wasn't the frightened advisor he pretended to be. He was one of the architects. My kids weren't just betraying me. They were being groomed to replace me. And the person at the top, Orion, was the one who wanted me gone for good. My phone buzzed again. A message from my daughter. "Dad, remember the papers. Tomorrow at 6. Don't be late." I stared at the screen with a calm I didn't expect. They thought tomorrow was their victory. They thought tomorrow I'd hand over every piece of my life. But everything had changed now. They didn't know I had the full network. They didn't know I had Carter back in play. They didn't know I had my wife's files. And they definitely didn't know that I had identified the real threat. If they wanted tomorrow to be the day everything changed, I would make sure it was. Just not in the way they planned. By the time the sun went down the next evening, I already knew exactly what kind of battlefield I was walking into. My children weren't inviting me over for a conversation. They were staging a takeover. And the fact that they insisted I come alone told me everything I needed to know. They thought I was tired, weak, predictable. Good. Let them think that. I drove to my daughter's house just before 6, parking a block away instead of in the driveway like they expected. I needed to see who else was there. And sure enough, right across the street, half hidden behind a row of hedges, was a sleek black SUV with tinted windows and company tags. The CEO wasn't inside the house. He was watching it. Watching us. Monitoring the handoff. My children weren't just pawns, they were messengers. Disposable ones. I walked toward the front porch, rehearsing the part one had to play. The defeated father, the confused old man, the one who wouldn't fight back. But inside, everything was carved into steel. My daughter opened the door before I knocked. The smile she forced onto her face was so fake it barely held shape. Dad, glad you made it. Her eyes flicked over my shoulder, checking if I brought anyone. When she saw I hadn't, her posture relaxed. Behind her, I saw my son pacing in the living room like he was delivering lines in a play he hadn't rehearsed enough. Papers were already laid out on the coffee table. Pens, folders, highlighters. A full performance waiting for its audience. Let's just get started, my daughter said briskly. She gestured toward the sofa, and I sat slowly, intentionally letting my knees crack a little, watching both of them take the bait. They thought they were watching a man wearing down. My son cleared his throat, picking up a folder dramatically. Dad, he said, putting on that tone people use when they're pretending to be concerned, we've been talking a lot, and we think it's time we step in and help you manage things before something bad happens. I didn't blink. I didn't argue. I didn't look surprised. I just said, okay, show me. That rattled them. My daughter exchanged a quick, sharp look with my son. They expected resistance. They expected yelling. They expected fear. But a silent man is unpredictable. And unpredictable is dangerous. My son pushed the folder toward me, and I flipped it open. On the first page was a neatly printed form titled, Petition for Guardianship and Financial Control. They wanted full control of everything. My assets, my home, my medical decisions. And they wanted it immediately. I skimmed the first few pages while they watched me greedily, waiting for me to agree, praying I didn't look too closely. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't reading the main text. I was scanning the margins. My daughter's handwriting. Notes. Instructions. And a single line that confirmed Carter's warning. CEO says file must be signed tonight. No delays. CEO says. It wasn't even subtle anymore. My children weren't thinking for themselves. They were executing orders. Dad, my son leaned forward, fake concern plastered on his face. Do you understand? This is for your protection. Is it? I asked quietly. My daughter smiled, relieved she thought I was finally listening, and said, yes, of course. You've been forgetting things, repeating conversations. We're worried. The irony nearly made me laugh. The only thing I'd been repeating was pretending. My daughter reached across the table and pushed a pen into my hand. All you have to do is sign right there at the bottom. She tapped the signature line. Her fingers were trembling. She wanted this so badly she could barely keep her composure. Before I sign, I said calmly, I want the doctor here. Silence. My daughter froze. My son's jaw clenched. Dad, he already filled out the report. It's right there. You don't need him. I leaned back, hands folded in my lap. He's on his way. They both snapped their heads toward me, eyes wide. Whoa, what? My son stammered. You invited him? No, I said. He invited himself. Right on cue, there was a knock at the door. Hard. Firm. Not polite. My daughter flinched. My son stood up too fast, knocking his knee against the table. They weren't expecting him. They weren't ready. Good. My daughter rushed to the door, opened it halfway, then immediately stepped back. The doctor walked in without waiting, without smiling, without greeting. He looked at me first, then at the documents on the coffee table, and then at my children, and his face tightened. I think we need to talk, he said. My son tried to sound confident. We already did. You submitted the competency evaluation. The doctor didn't even look at him. Yes, I submitted the evaluation. And I specifically said it needed to be delivered to your father directly, not to either of you. My daughter swallowed hard. We were just going to explain. No. The doctor cut her off. You weren't. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out the real file, the one my kids had never seen. Mr. Hayes, he said, handing it to me. These are the actual results. Unedited. My son's face went pale. My daughter's knees visibly weakened. And in one smooth motion, the doctor turned to them and said the sentence that detonated the room. Your father is in perfect cognitive health. The only abnormalities in these tests point to elevated stress responses that match the classic markers of elder intimidation and coercion. My daughter's hand flew to her mouth. My son staggered back like he'd been punched. And I sat there quietly, finally letting a small, cold smile form. Because I wasn't done. Not even close. The doctor stepped aside as another figure appeared in the doorway, a figure neither of my children expected. It wasn't Carter. It wasn't the CEO. It was someone who made both of them whisper the same thing at the same time. Mom? My late wife's sister stepped into the room. The one person my children believed hated me. The one person they thought would support their plan. And she said, in a calm, low voice, I saw the audit. I know everything. And so did your mother before she died. My children looked like the floor had disappeared beneath their feet. And suddenly, every bit of power they thought they had drained out of the room. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't going to save them. It was going to bury them. My children didn't sit down again. They couldn't. Their legs were shaking too hard. My daughter clutched the back of a chair like she needed it to stay upright, and my son kept looking between the doctor, his aunt, and me, like he was trying to find an escape route. There wasn't one. Not anymore. Linda, my late wife's sister, stepped farther into the living room, closing the door behind her, sealing them inside with the truth they had spent months trying to bury. Her voice was calm, level, almost gentle, which made every word she spoke feel like a blade. Your mother knew you were planning something, she said, looking directly at my daughter. She told me there were whispers, conversations she wasn't supposed to hear, questions about bank accounts, about Dad's retirement, about control. My daughter's face crumpled. That's not. Aunt Linda, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Linda snapped, her patience evaporating instantly. Your mother had cancer eating through her spine, and while she was fighting for her life, her own children were whispering about how to take advantage of the man who sat by her bed every night. My son's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like someone had ripped the air from the room. Mom wouldn't. She wouldn't want you to accuse us like that, he croaked. Linda stepped closer to him. She left a video. They both froze. Their eyes shot to me, wide, terrified, wet. My daughter's voice broke. A video? Yes, I said quietly. A message. She recorded it 2 days before she died. My son shook his head violently. No, Dad. There's no way. Why would she? The doctor held up a small envelope. Because she asked me to deliver this after her final evaluation. She was worried about what might happen to you after she passed. I took the envelope, feeling its weight like a pulse in my hand. My children stared at it like it was radioactive. Do you want to tell them? Linda asked me softly. Or do you want me to? I looked at my kids, these 2 people I had raised, fed, sheltered, protected, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see my children. I saw 2 adults who had willingly chosen greed over blood, and who were shocked to learn their mother recognized it long before they ever acted on it. Sit down, I said. My voice was low. Final. They obeyed instantly. My daughter sat first, collapsing into the chair like her bones had turned soft. My son sat next to her, his knees bouncing uncontrollably. I opened the envelope, pulled out a flash drive, and held it between my fingers. Your mother recorded a message because she didn't trust you, I said. She told the doctor. She told Linda. And she told me if anything happened, if you ever tried to take advantage of me, this video would be the first thing played in court. My daughter's breathing turned shallow. Dad, please, you're misunderstanding. We were just worried. Worried? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. You hired a lawyer behind my back. You forged a medical summary. You attempted to take guardianship of a mentally competent parent. You were ready to put me under full control like I was your project. My son finally snapped and yelled. We were trying to protect your legacy. The doctor barked out a laugh, so sharp it cut through the room. No, you were trying to protect his money. My son's face turned white. He had been exposed, cleanly, efficiently, undeniably. Linda pointed toward the folders on the table. Your mother suspected this. She wasn't sure until the week before she passed. She saw how you talked about the business, how you talked about the house, how you talked about planning for Dad's future. She wasn't stupid. My daughter covered her mouth with both hands, eyes overflowing. She thought we'd hurt you? No, I said, my voice colder than I expected. She thought you'd betray me. And she was right. Silence swallowed the room whole. For a few seconds, all I heard was their breathing, ragged and uneven. Then Linda reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope of her own, set it on the table, and slid it toward me. "This," she said, "is the full audit the CEO showed you." My children stiffened. "I got my own copy," Linda added. "From the SEC." My daughter's head jerked up. "The SEC?" Linda nodded. "Your uncle, the CFO, filed a whistleblower disclosure the day before he died. He gave your mother the names of everyone involved." She turned her gaze sharply to my son. "Including yours." He blinked, stunned. "Mine? I didn't. What are you talking about?" "Your email," Linda said simply. "Your transaction logs. Your unauthorized transfers. Your attempt to move company funds into an offshore account under a shell corporation with your initials." My son stopped breathing altogether. "No," he whispered. "That wasn't me." "I didn't." "It was," I said. "I saw the documents myself." My daughter looked at him like he was a stranger. You told me Dad was exaggerating. You said none of that was real." He didn't answer. He couldn't. His silence was an admission all by itself. The doctor stepped closer to me and said quietly, "Mr. Hayes, you have everything you need to protect yourself, legally and financially. Your children have no grounds left to challenge your competency." My daughter broke then, completely. She sobbed into her hands, shoulders shaking, gasping for breath, pleading with the floor. But I didn't reach for her. Not this time. I wasn't going to comfort the people who tried to dismantle my life while smiling across my dinner table. And as my son stared numbly at the envelopes, one from the SEC, one from my wife, one from the doctor, I realized something I hadn't expected to feel. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. "Tomorrow," I said finally, standing, "we finish this." And the moment I stepped toward the door, the black SUV across the street turned on its headlights, like the CEO was signaling that the real fight was just beginning. I walked out onto the porch with Linda and the doctor behind me, and the night air felt colder than it should have. Not winter cold, the kind of cold you feel when you know someone's watching you. Across the street, the black SUV's headlights stayed on, pointed directly at my house. I couldn't see the driver, but I already knew who sent it. The CEO texted me 30 seconds later. He moved faster than we expected. "Do not leave with your children. Wait." I read the message twice, my pulse climbing with each word. Linda leaned toward me. "Is that him?" I nodded. "Something's wrong." The SUV's driver door cracked open an inch. Not fully, not enough to step out, just enough to show someone inside wanted me to know they were there. The doctor swallowed hard. "Mr. Hayes, who exactly is watching your house?" "Not mine," I said quietly. "Theirs." And I pointed back at the living room window where my children stood, silhouettes behind the blinds, still shocked, still reeling, still digesting the fact that everything they'd spent months planning had just been burned to the ground in under 10 minutes. "You need to tell me what's happening," the doctor said. "Now." Linda stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Is that one of the board members?" I shook my head slowly. "Worse." My phone buzzed again. Another text from the CEO. "Do not speak to them alone. He's on his way." Linda exhaled sharply. "Oh God. Which he?" I looked at her. The man my children trusted. The man they'd been secretly meeting. The man who had been feeding them documents, pushing them to challenge my competence, urging them to act before the internal audit was complete. "The lead investor," I said. "The one trying to force the takeover." Linda's hand went to her mouth. "He wouldn't come here himself. That's reckless." "He's desperate," I said. "He knows the audit is going public next week. All his offshore accounts, all the shell companies, all the transfers, they're about to be exposed. He needs leverage. And my children," I added bitterly, "were supposed to be his leverage." The SUV headlights clicked off. The engine stayed running. My phone vibrated again, this time a call. The CEO's name flashed across the screen. "Get inside," he said the moment I answered. "Robert, listen carefully. Your kids didn't just try to take your guardianship. Someone else was behind it." "I know," I said, watching the SUV like it might lunge at the house. "He's parked outside." "And he shouldn't be," the CEO said. "We just served him a notice this morning. The SEC froze 3 of his accounts. He's cornered. That makes him dangerous." Linda cursed under her breath. The doctor looked at both of us like he had just been thrown into a war he didn't understand. "He's not here for me," I said. "He's here for them." The CEO sighed. "Exactly. He needs someone he can pin this on. Someone he can prove acted alone. Someone he can sacrifice." That hit hard. He was right. My children had no idea they had been disposable to the man they trusted. They thought they were rising in power. They were pawns. Expendable ones. So what now? I asked. Stay inside, the CEO repeated. I'm 5 minutes away, and I'm not coming alone. The call ended. Linda grabbed my arm. Robert, if he gets to your children first, he won't, I said. But the truth was I didn't know. Not tonight. Not with how fast all this had escalated. The SUV engine cut off. The driver stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long coat and gloves. He didn't look at me. He looked at my house, like he already owned it. I heard my daughter gasp behind the blinds. My son stepped into view beside her, frozen in place. Get away from the window, I snapped. They didn't move. The doctor whispered, should we call the police? He is the police, Linda muttered bitterly. Or he owns half of them. The man in the long coat started walking across the street, slow, confident, every step deliberate. Inside, I said. Now. We went in and locked the door. My kids spun toward us instantly. Dad, what's happening? Who is that? My daughter's voice was trembling. My son looked like all the color had drained out of him. That, I said, is the man you trusted. My son's jaw dropped. No, he wouldn't come here. He told us, he promised, but the pounding on the front door cut him off. 3 hard knocks. Then silence. Then another knock, slower this time. Taunting. Open the door, Robert, the man's voice called. Deep. Smooth. Cold. We need to talk. My daughter backed into the wall. My son whispered. Dad, please tell me you didn't tell him we were here. I didn't need to, I said. He's been watching all of us for months. A second knock. Harder. Robert. I won't ask again. Linda turned to me. What do we do? Before I could answer, headlights flashed through the window. Not one set, 3. 3 sleek black sedans pulled up behind the SUV, blocking it in. Men stepped out. Not investors. Not threats. The CEO and his entire legal and security team. We're ending this tonight, I whispered. And the moment the CEO reached my porch, the man in the long coat stopped knocking. Because he finally realized he wasn't the hunter anymore. He was surrounded, cornered, outnumbered, and for the first time, afraid. The pounding stopped the moment the CEO stepped onto my porch. I heard the shift in the air, that silent tension right before 2 predators recognize each other. My children huddled near the hallway, too stunned and scared to blink. Linda and the doctor stood beside me, not breathing, listening for every sound. The CEO knocked once, calmly, the exact opposite of the frantic force we'd heard seconds earlier. Robert, it's me. Open the door. I unlocked it and stepped back as he walked inside with 2 security officers behind him. He didn't bother taking off his coat. He didn't smile. He didn't greet anyone. He looked straight at my kids like he was looking at suspects in an interrogation room. You too, he said. Move away from the front windows. They obeyed instantly, because one look at him told them the danger outside wasn't the only danger anymore. The CEO turned to me. He's waiting. Who? My daughter whispered. The CEO's jaw tightened. The man you thought was helping you take your father's assets. My son's breath caught in his throat. He told us. He said, he lied, the CEO cut in. And now he's trying to shift blame before federal agents get to him. The doctor sank into a chair, finally understanding the scale of what he'd stepped into. Linda crossed her arms, glaring toward the door. So what happens now? The CEO stepped closer, lowering his voice. Now, he said, we give him a chance to talk before law enforcement arrives. And I need Robert beside me. My daughter choked on a sob. Dad, please don't go out there. Please, he's dangerous. The CEO looked at her, eyes cold. He wouldn't be here if you hadn't helped him. Her mouth snapped shut. The CEO turned to me. Ready? I nodded. Because if I was ever going to take back my name, my legacy, my peace, this was the moment. We opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. The man in the long coat stood in the glow of the street lamps, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed like he was waiting for a valet. The CEO took 2 steps forward. You shouldn't be here. The man smiled, a thin, reptile smile. On the contrary, he said, this is exactly where I should be. His voice was too calm, too controlled, and his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, shifted to me. Robert, he said with a softness that made my skin crawl, you've caused me a great deal of trouble. The CEO stepped between us. He didn't cause your trouble. You caused your own when you started embezzling funds and committing securities fraud. The man tilted his head. Strong accusations, considering you've spent years sweeping internal problems under the rug. Not anymore, the CEO said. Not after what you orchestrated. The man's jaw twitched. A small tell, but enough to show the crack in his confidence. "Where are your children, Robert?" he asked suddenly. Every muscle in my body tightened. "They're safe," I said, "and far from your reach." His smile widened slightly. "Safe? Are you sure?" He took one step closer. The CEO blocked him again. "One more step, and you'll be face down on the pavement." The man's eyes flicked to the CEO's security team. He knew he was outnumbered, outpowered, cornered. "You've made a mistake," he said softly. "All of you." "The only mistake," the CEO snapped, "was trusting you." The man reached slowly into his coat. Security tensed, hands on holsters, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out a folded stack of papers. He held them out. "These," he said, "are the signatures." The CEO didn't take them. "What signatures?" "The ones your children gave me," he said, smiling at the shock on my face. "The ones where they agreed to transfer oversight of the family trust the moment their father was declared incompetent." My chest tightened. The CEO exhaled slowly through his nose. "You coerced them." "I guided them," the man corrected. "They wanted the power. I simply showed them how to take it." He looked at me again. "Your son was eager. Your daughter, hesitant. But she came around. Fear does that to people." My stomach turned. The CEO's voice was low and lethal. "Those signatures won't save you." The man shrugged. "They'll complicate things. And that's all I need." Then he added, "For now." "You're done," the CEO said. "You're boxed in from every direction. The SEC is on you. Internal Affairs is on you. Law enforcement is on its way." The man's smile disappeared. His eyes hardened. "I am never done." Suddenly, the CEO's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his entire expression changed. He turned sharply to the security team. "Inside. Now." "What happened?" I demanded. The CEO grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the house. "They're not after you anymore," he said. "They're after your children." My blood ran cold. "What? Why?" He opened the front door, urgency written across his face. "Because they found something," he said. "And if that man outside gets to your kids first." I rushed into the living room where my children stood trembling at the bottom of the stairs. "Dad, what's happening?" my daughter cried. The CEO didn't soften his voice. "The SEC uncovered a second shell company. One tied directly to both of you." My son paled. We didn't." "It doesn't matter," the CEO said. "Your signatures are on financial documents. You look complicit." The realization hit them both at once. They weren't just witnesses. They weren't just pawns. They were liabilities. "He's going to use you," the CEO said, "as bargaining chips. He'll flip you against your father, then flip you against each other." My daughter's knees buckled, and she grabbed the railing to stay upright. My son stared at me, horror filling his eyes. "Dad, what do we do?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Slow, deliberate. The CEO looked at me. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "don't let him separate you. Not even for a second." Then he stepped toward the door and opened it. The man in the long coat wasn't alone anymore. Two more men stood behind him, and they weren't smiling. The moment the door swung open, the air in the house snapped tight like a wire pulled to its breaking point. The man in the long coat stood tall, his posture calm, collected, but the two men behind him radiated something colder, trained silence, empty expressions, the kind of men who moved with purpose and didn't need to speak to make you understand you were in danger. The CEO didn't flinch. Neither did his security team. But my daughter gasped, and my son stepped back until he hit the wall, eyes wide with a fear he couldn't hide. The man in the coat stepped forward just enough for the porch light to catch the edge of his smile. "I think we need to have a conversation," he said. "A private one." The CEO shook his head once. "There's nothing private left. Whatever you think you can negotiate, you're out of time." The man chuckled softly. "Time is relative, especially for men in your position." Then his eyes slid to my children, slow and deliberate. "And theirs." The CEO's security stepped forward immediately, closing the gap. "You're not entering this house." "I don't need to enter," the man said, hands still calmly in his coat pockets. "I just need the children to step outside. Their signatures are on federal documents. That makes them part of my leverage." My son inhaled sharply. "We didn't know what we were signing. Intent is irrelevant," the man replied. "Paperwork is paperwork." My daughter started crying again, hands over her mouth. "Please, we didn't do anything," he smiled. "You did exactly what I needed." The CEO turned to the security team. "Move them upstairs. Now." The officers escorted my children toward the staircase, but the man on the porch lifted a hand. "If they go upstairs," he said softly, I'll make sure the agents watching your street assume they're fleeing. And you know what that means." The CEO froze mid-step. "They're not here to arrest anyone," he said cautiously. "How sure are you about that?" The man asked. "Your audit department discovered my involvement, but they're still piecing together the network. For all they know, your company's former CEO and his family are part of my system." My stomach dropped. He wasn't bluffing. He knew exactly how federal agents behaved when uncertain. He knew confusion meant leverage. He knew my kids were the weakest link in the chain. The CEO whispered to me without looking away from the man. "He's trying to draw us into a panic move. Don't react. He wants chaos." The man in the coat seemed amused. "Chaos isn't my goal, Robert. Cooperation is." Then he shifted slightly to the side, revealing a black car idling behind him, engine running, headlights off. "I came to offer your children a ride. A conversation. Clarification. Before law enforcement reaches conclusions none of us will like." The CEO's voice sharpened. "You're not taking them anywhere." The man shrugged. "If they stay, they're in danger. If they leave with me, I can contain the damage." My son whispered, "Dad, I don't want to go with him." The CEO took a careful step forward. "Robert, keep your kids behind you." I did. I spread my arms instinctively, like a father protecting children who, 30 minutes ago, had been mocking me at a dinner table. But blood is blood, and danger changes everything. The man's smile faded. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be. If your children don't cooperate, things will escalate." "Is that a threat?" the CEO asked. "It's a warning," he replied. "Your company's board is already panicking. They don't know what's real. They don't know who's compromised." That uncertainty ripples downward. Then he turned to me again. "Robert, let's be reasonable. Your kids are implicated. They need guidance. They need protection," I said. "Protection from you." The man laughed quietly. "I've been protecting them for months. Without me, they would have been exposed the moment I filed their signatures." My daughter shook her head, crying harder. "We didn't know what you were doing." "Of course you didn't," he replied. "If you had, you might have backed out. That would have been inconvenient." The CEO's jaw tightened. "Enough. We're done with this conversation." The man's expression shifted, just slightly, and that was the first moment I saw something behind his eyes that wasn't confidence. It was calculation. Desperation. He needed my kids. And whatever he needed them for wasn't good. He nodded to the two men behind him. A command. No words. They stepped forward. The CEO reacted instantly. "Inside. Lockdown protocol." Security grabbed my children and moved them back. The CEO grabbed my sleeve and shoved me behind him as the front door slammed. "Lock it," he ordered. The deadbolt clicked. Then a second lock. Then a third. The house fell into a suffocating silence, only broken by my daughter's shaking breaths and my son's whispered curse under his breath. "Are we safe?" my son asked. The CEO didn't answer. He checked the security monitor by the door. The man and his two associates stood calmly on the porch, not leaving, but not approaching. Waiting, thinking, calculating. "No," the CEO said finally. "We're not safe yet." "What does he want with us?" my daughter whispered. The CEO took a breath. "He doesn't want you." My children stared at him, confused and terrified. He continued, voice darkening. "He wants your father." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Me?" The CEO nodded slowly. "He's convinced you're the only one who can stop the investigation. Which means the moment his plan collapsed, you became his target." Silence swallowed the room. Then my son asked in a trembling whisper, "Dad, what's going to happen now?" The CEO looked at me, then at my kids, then back to the front door. "Now," he said quietly. "Now we prepare. Because the man on that porch isn't leaving. Not until he gets what he came for." The house felt smaller with every passing second. Not because it actually was, but because everyone inside finally understood the same thing at the same time. This wasn't some family dispute anymore. This was a crime scene waiting to happen. My daughter sank down onto the bottom step of the staircase, hands in her hair, eyes fixed on the floor. My son paced in tight circles, muttering curses under his breath, like he could rewind the last 6 months by swearing hard enough. Linda stood with her arms folded, jaw tight, staring at the front door like she could see through it. The doctor hovered near the kitchen doorway, completely out of his depth, but too deep in to back out. The CEO stayed by the security monitor, his eyes locked on the live feed from the porch. The man in the long coat hadn't moved. He was still standing there, too calm, too patient, like he knew time was on his side. "You said he wants me," I finally said quietly. "Why?" The The CEO glanced at me. Because to him, you're the last piece of the puzzle he can still control. Everyone else is slipping. Explain, I said. He exhaled. The SEC has enough on him to make his life very difficult. What they don't have yet is a clean, cooperative narrative from inside the company. Someone who can explain the full structure. Someone credible. Someone who built the system he corrupted. It hit me like a physical blow. Me? He nodded. You're the original architect. The way the financial network is woven together, your testimony would tie everything into a story a jury could understand. Without you, it's still a complicated mess of shell companies and internal transfers that his lawyers can muddy. With you, it turns into a clear line of intent. So he's here, I said slowly, to scare me into staying quiet. The CEO shook his head. No, if he wanted to scare you, he would have sent more lawyers and letters. He's here to control you, to cut his losses and keep you from talking to federal investigators at all. My son stopped pacing. Wait, he said, his voice cracking. You're saying he'll try to hurt Dad? The CEO didn't answer right away. He didn't have to. The silence said enough. We're not going to give him the chance, Linda said, voice sharp. We call the police. We give them everything. We've already called them, the CEO said. They're staging a few streets over, waiting for confirmation. Confirmation of what? I asked. That all three parts of the network are in one place, he said. The architect, he nodded at me. The manipulated heirs, he nodded at my children. And the mastermind outside. Right now, we're the center of a storm. My daughter finally lifted her head. Her voice was small, barely audible. We didn't know. The CEO looked at her, and for the first time that night, there was a fraction of softness in his expression. I believe you didn't understand the scale, he said. But you knew enough to know it was wrong. You knew enough to know you were hiding it from your father. Tears spilled over again. We thought we were just positioning. We thought we were protecting our share before you. Dad did something stupid. My son flinched at her words and looked at me, ashamed. We thought you'd give away the company, or let it be dragged down with all the scandals. I stared at both of them. So your solution, I said slowly, was to help the man causing the scandals take control? My son swallowed hard. We thought. He told us. He told you exactly what you wanted to hear, Linda cut in. That you were smarter. That you were more forward-thinking. That your father was a relic. I watched their faces crumble as she spoke. Because every word she said was true. You didn't get manipulated by someone like the man outside unless a part of you wanted to believe his lies. The CEO checked his phone, then looked at me. The agents want to move in when he makes his next mistake, he said. They need him to cross a line, something clear. Threat, coercion, attempted removal. We can't go out there guns blazing. We need him to reveal intent. And how exactly do we make him do that? I asked. The CEO hesitated. By giving him what he wants most. I stared at him. You want me to go outside? You won't be alone, he said quickly. We'll wire you. Audio and video. We have federal agents listening in already through the audit feed. One explicit threat, one clear offer to obstruct, and they move. Linda shook her head fiercely. Absolutely not. You're not using him as bait. The CEO looked at me. He's been bait since the audit started. The difference is tonight you know it. He stepped closer, so only I could hear the next part. Robert, this doesn't end with a quiet arrest in a boardroom. This man doesn't go away because someone files a report. If we let him walk now, he'll go underground. He'll keep pulling strings. And next time, he won't use your children. He'll use someone who has no reason to hesitate. My hands clenched without thinking. I pictured my late wife lying in that hospital bed, worrying not about her own life, but about what would happen to me after she was gone. I pictured the flash drive she left, the files, the video. She didn't build all that for me to hide behind other men forever. Wire me, I said. Linda spun toward me. Robert, wire me, I repeated. This ends tonight. The CEO searched my face, then nodded once. In the study, he said to his security team. Now, they led me down the hall to the room where I used to pay bills and read the paper. Now it looked like a field office. The CEO's men unpacked a small kit, a button camera, a slim microphone, a tiny transmitter that hooked into the inside of my shirt. The doctor watched nervously from the doorway, looking like he was witnessing a scene from a movie instead of a life he'd accidentally wandered into. If at any point you feel unsafe, one of the security guys said, say the phrase, I'm too old for this. Say it clearly. That's our signal to end the conversation and move in. I nodded. Another man handed me a small, thin device no bigger than a car key fob. This is a backup, he said. Press it once, and it sends an immediate distress signal to the agents outside. The CEO adjusted my collar, flattening the fabric over the mic. Remember, he said quietly. He thinks you're the piece he can still control. He'll offer you something. A way out. Immunity. Money. Protection. Your job is to let him talk. Don't try to outplay him. Don't threaten him. Just listen. I took a breath. And if he tries something? The CEO's eyes hardened. He won't get the chance. We walked back toward the front of the house. My children watched me come down the hallway like I was walking toward an execution. My daughter grabbed my hand. Dad, don't go out there. Please. We already messed up. Don't risk yourself because of us. I squeezed her fingers gently. This isn't just about you two, I said. This is about everyone who gets crushed when people like him win. My son's eyes were glassy. We're sorry, he whispered. We really are. I held his gaze for a long moment. You'll have time to prove it, I said. Then I turned toward the door. The CEO unlocked it, stepped aside, and nodded once. We'll be listening, he said. Every second. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. The night air hit my face like a wave. The man in the long coat smiled when he saw me. There you are, he said softly. The man of the hour. I walked down one step, stopping halfway between the door and the edge of the porch. Not too close. Not too far. What do you want? I asked. He chuckled. Direct. I like that. His eyes flicked briefly to the corners of the house, to the shadows where security and agents were hidden. He knew they were there. He just didn't care. I want to make you an offer, he said. One that keeps you out of a courtroom. One that keeps your children out of prison. One that leaves your legacy intact. My heart pounded against the mic. And what do you want in return? He smiled wider. Silence, he said. Yours. He stood there at the bottom of my porch steps like a man presenting a gift instead of a threat, hands in his coat pockets, eyes calm, voice steady. Silence, he repeated. Yours. Permanently. My fingers brushed the tiny panic transmitter sewn under my shirt, but I didn't press it. Not yet. The agents needed him to expose himself fully. Confident men always overplayed their hand. He tilted his head slightly. You're a smart man, Robert. You built a financial empire with cleaner books than any competitor in the region. That's why this is simple. You testify, the entire corporate structure burns, federal auditors crawl through every account. Your children get charged with conspiracy, fraud, obstruction, whatever sticks. And you, well. He took one slow step closer. I don't think a man at your age wants to spend the years you have left sitting under fluorescent lights in a room full of lawyers. He was baiting me, testing me. I kept my face neutral. And if I don't talk? He smiled like he'd rehearsed this moment. Then we negotiate. Quietly. Privately. You walk away with a retirement package larger than your pride will admit you need. Your children remain free. Your reputation remains intact enough. You fade out of the picture, and in exchange? He shrugged. You keep your mouth closed. About everything. So you take my company, I said. And I pretend you didn't rot it from the inside. He didn't even blink. Precisely. Behind the door I knew the CEO, the agents, Linda, my kids, everyone, was listening to every word. Why me? I asked. Why not just keep manipulating them? I nodded toward the house. He smirked. Because your children aren't useful anymore. They panicked. And panicked people become liabilities. They leave trails. They confess. They make deals with the government. You, on the other hand, he pointed at me. You've always been predictable, controlled, mature. His voice lowered. I can work with a man like you, but not with foolish heirs who haven't earned the power they want. You built something valuable. I intend to keep it alive. Alive? I repeated. For who? He stepped closer again, lowering his voice. For people who know what to do with it. People like me. And there it was. The arrogance. The weakness. The exact mistake Carter had warned me about. I took one step down until I was at the bottom of the porch, standing just a foot away from him. The agents would be tightening their positions now, waiting for the line to be crossed. So let's make it clear, I said calmly. If I speak, my kids burn. If I stay silent, you win. He nodded. That's the exchange. I let the quiet stretch, letting him believe he had me. Then I said the words that snapped the trap shut. And if I refuse both? His eyes hardened instantly. Then we remove you from the equation. There. Intent. Direct threat. My thumb pressed the hidden fob. The click was silent. The reaction was not. The night exploded. Floodlights burst on from 3 angles. Agents shouted commands. Red laser dust tracked across his torso as tactical boots pounded across my lawn. He jolted back, eyes wide, realizing too late he'd walked into a full federal sting. "Hands where I can see them," a voice roared from the dark. He reached inside his coat. Bad instinct, wrong moment, and 3 agents pinned him to the ground in less than a second, tearing the coat open, yanking his arms back. He screamed something, maybe at me, maybe at the agents, but the sound was swallowed by chaos. More cars screeched in from the street. Backup agents sprinted up the driveway. My son threw the door open behind me, panic flooding his face. "Dad," he shouted. But I didn't move. I just watched as they hauled the man upright, cuffed, furious, humiliated, struggling against 2 agents as they dragged him toward a black SUV. He locked eyes with me as they opened the door to throw him inside. "This isn't over, Hayes," he barked. "The network is bigger than you know." I stepped forward until I was inches from his face. "Then they'll fall next," I said. "Every single one." The agents shoved him inside, slammed the door, and the SUV peeled away down the road. The moment the engine's sound faded, the silence snapped back over the street like a sheet of ice. My children were standing in the doorway behind me, my daughter crying quietly, my son frozen in disbelief. Linda walked out, slipped her hand into mine, steady and warm. The CEO stepped onto the porch, exhaling deeply. "It's over," he said quietly. "You did it." I shook my head. "We didn't even start." He blinked. "What do you mean?" I pulled the button camera off my collar, held it up between 2 fingers, and let the porch light shine on it. "Because he told the truth," I said. "The network is bigger. And now that he's in custody?" I handed the device to the CEO. "They're going to come for the throne he just lost." The CEO swallowed, realizing exactly what that meant. "Then what do we do now?" I looked back at my family, broken, ashamed, terrified, and then toward the road where the SUV had disappeared. "We go to war," I said quietly. "And this time, we're ready." 3 months later, if you had walked into my life on that Tuesday morning, you wouldn't have guessed that federal agents had once tackled a man in a long coat on my front lawn. The house was quiet again. The headlines had finally moved on to some new scandal. The neighbors had stopped pretending they weren't curious every time they saw an unfamiliar car in my driveway. The man in the long coat, his real name was Leonard Crane, was sitting in a federal facility somewhere, trading names for leniency, doing the only thing men like him know how to do when they run out of leverage: sell someone else. My children had lawyers. They had court dates. They had long, sleepless nights. But they were home, not in prison, not in handcuffs. Not because they deserved a free pass, but because after hours in conference rooms with the SEC and federal prosecutors and the company's legal team, one truth became clear. They were pawns, not partners. Reckless, selfish, willing pawns, yes, but not architects. Crane had forged documents with their digital signatures, altered language, inserted clauses that turned routine succession planning into attempted corporate hijacking. The law came down on him a lot harder than it came down on them. Still, my kids weren't spared. They signed confessions. They surrendered certain assets. They agreed to cooperate fully and to stay under strict financial oversight for years. Their reputations took a beating. Their shiny futures suddenly had dents all over them. And I had a decision to make: destroy them completely, or give them a chance to grow up for the first time in their lives. That answer didn't come from me. It came from my wife, from a woman who had been gone for 6 years, but still managed to move pieces on the board like she was sitting right beside me. The CEO called me into his office again. Same 42nd floor, same city skyline, same glass walls. But this time he wasn't alone. The company's general counsel was there. So was Dr. Keller, the neurologist who had shut down the incompetence narrative before it ever got off the ground. And on the table between them was a leather-bound folder I had never seen before. The CEO gestured to the chair at the head of the table. "Sit here," he said. "This one's yours." I lowered myself into the seat slowly. "What is this?" The general counsel slid the folder toward me. "This," she said, "is something we discovered while digging through the old corporate archives. It took some time to piece it together. Your wife left us a maze to follow." I froze. "My wife?" She nodded. "About 8 years ago, your board approved a restructuring of the company's voting rights. On paper, it was framed as a routine modernization. Clean up old language, align with best practices, that sort of thing. It passed unanimously. But buried in the revisions was a very specific clause, drafted by outside counsel your wife chose herself." The CEO leaned forward. "A clause that never fully took effect. Until now." My heart was pounding again, like I was back on that porch under the floodlights. What clause? The general counsel flipped the folder open, revealing a single-page document with dense corporate language and one small paragraph highlighted in yellow. She tapped it with her pen. This clause, she said, creates what's called a controlling stewardship share, a special class of vote that only activates under 3 conditions. 1. Credible internal evidence of material fraud by senior leadership or major shareholders. 2. An attempted hostile action against the founding family's patriarch. And 3. A signed declaration from an independent physician attesting to that patriarch's full mental capacity. She looked up at me. All 3 conditions were met in the last 90 days. I stared at her, then at the CEO, then at Dr. Keller. He gave a small, apologetic smile. That cognitive exam I gave you, he said. It wasn't just about shutting down your kid's guardianship petition. Your wife approached me years ago. She asked me, if certain events ever happened, to be the one to examine you, to sign off on your competence. She wanted someone outside the company, outside the family, whose judgment she trusted. My throat tightened. She spoke to you? He nodded. She told me you'd never ask for this kind of power for yourself. She said if anything like tonight ever happened. Well, what did she call it? He thought for a moment, then smiled faintly. She said, if anyone ever decides to treat Robert like a problem to be managed instead of the man who built the solution, I want the law to slap them in the face. The CEO slid a small, black, polished card across the table. It looked like a high-end credit card, but there were no numbers on it. Just the company logo and a single engraved name. Mine. What is that? I asked. That, the CEO said, is the physical token associated with the stewardship share. It was generated when the clause triggered. Whoever holds it, legally, has the final say in any vote affecting the company's ownership, structure, or sale. It's not day-to-day control. It's something more fundamental. No merger, no takeover, no sale, no change of control can happen without you. My head spun. You're telling me my wife somehow built a kill switch into the company charter? She built a shield, the general counsel corrected. A last line of defense. It sat dormant for years. No one noticed it because no one needed it. Until Crane tried to use your children to erase you. The CEO folded his hands. Your kids thought they were helping him move you off the board, into a quiet little corner. Instead, they triggered the one thing that guaranteed you would never be erased. I picked up the card. It was heavy for its size, cold and solid in my hand. My wife's face flashed in my mind. That small knowing smile she used to have when she'd say, "You worry about the work, I'll worry about everything else." So what does this mean? I asked. Practically, the CEO exhaled. It means Crane is finished. It means any investor aligned with him is finished. It means any future board that tries to sell or gut or flip this company without your consent runs headfirst into a legal brick wall your wife built with surgical precision. He paused. And it means your children will spend the rest of their lives knowing that the man they tried to sideline is the one person no one can sideline again. I sat back, the weight of it all pressing down and lifting at the same time. My wife hadn't just trusted me. She had protected me. From my enemies. From my kids. Maybe even from myself. What about them? I finally asked. My son. My daughter. What do they get? The general counsel closed the folder. That's up to you now, she said. The stewardship share isn't about money. It's about veto power, influence, direction. You can cut them out entirely. You can bring them back in under conditions. You can require them to earn every inch they're given. The CEO looked me in the eye. But whatever you decide, he said, it starts with the truth. Full truth. No more secrets. That afternoon, I called my children back to the house. No agents this time. No law firms. No doctors. Just the 3 of us at the same dining room table where they once called me a retired nobody. They sat across from me in silence. Both looked older than they had 3 months ago. Not in years, in weight, in regret. I placed the black card on the table between us. Their eyes went straight to it. My son swallowed. What's that? The thing you accidentally gave me, I said, when you tried to get rid of me. My daughter's voice was barely there. We didn't mean to, don't intend, I said softly. You still did it. I told them everything. About Crane. About the stewardship clause. About the audit. About their signatures. About their near miss with federal charges. About their mother's quiet, ruthless foresight. When I finished, they both just sat there, eyes red, faces slack, stunned by the simple reality. They had believed the wrong man. They had trusted the wrong voice. They had tried to cut out the one person their mother had moved heaven and earth to protect. So that's it, my son said hoarsely. You own everything now. You control everything. No, I said. I control something more important. I control what happens next. I let that sit for a beat. I can bar you from the company. I can rewrite my will. I can make sure every dollar I've ever earned goes anywhere but your hands. I'd be justified. The people in that boardroom would applaud. My daughter started crying again. My son lowered his head. But I'm not going to, I said. They both looked up, shocked. You're not walking away clean, I continued. You're not getting a pat on the head and a second chance like nothing happened. You are going to work your way back from this. Slowly, publicly, uncomfortably. You're going to start at the bottom of departments you once thought you'd inherit. I pointed at my son. You'll spend a year in compliance and risk. Not as a leader, as staff. You'll sit in on every painful conversation about what Crane did using your names. I turned to my daughter. You're going to shadow internal audit. You're going to learn how real oversight works. You're going to sit with people who dig into financial lies for a living, and you're going to listen when they talk about the human cost of greed. They both stared at me like I had just handed them a prison sentence. You're not heirs anymore, I said. You're candidates. The stewardship card means I approve or deny every promotion you ever get in this company. Not based on blood, based on integrity, based on who you become. What if we fail? My son whispered. Then you fail, I said. And the company goes to people who didn't try to sell their own father's name for a shortcut. The room went quiet. My daughter reached for the card, then stopped. Can I at least hold it? She asked. Not yet, I said, and I slid it back into my pocket. You haven't earned the weight of it. That night, when the house was quiet again, I sat in my old leather chair and turned the card over in my fingers. It was just a piece of metal. But to me, it was a message from my wife, written in legal language instead of ink. They might forget who you are. The world might move on, but I will not let them erase you. People say revenge is seeing your enemies suffer. Maybe sometimes that's true. But sitting there, I realized something different. The real revenge wasn't Crane in a cell or my children terrified of courtrooms. The real revenge was this. Every person who ever treated me like a retired nobody would one day have to answer to the man they tried to push off the board, and they would never see my name the same way again. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below, and don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.